Both of the scripture writers from which Mary read this morning appear to like trees. Do you like trees? What is your relationship to trees? Some of you may really love trees, and let me say, please don't be embarrassed or ashamed to admit that. We often hear the term tree hugger. You heard that term? Used in a disparaging way to describe those who have a special passion for the care of our environment. But I suspect it will be the tree huggers of our world who will one day be saying back to the climate change deniers and the go green scoffers, I told you we had better be kinder to our planet, or we're going to live or die to regret it. I have a somewhat mixed romance with trees. A love-hate relationship. I would not call myself a tree hugger, but I do have deep appreciation for trees. In fact, 24 years ago, when Jean and I were looking to buy a house in Anderson, it was the trees which led us to where we still are today. Jean was working as a nurse at Harris Hospital back in those days, and she would often have to work on Sundays, so on Sunday afternoons I would go to real estate open houses to pass the time. One Sunday afternoon in early September 1994, I visited a house at 307 Cumberland Way, Beaver Creek subdivision. When Jean got home, I said, "Get in the car. You have got to see this place, this neighborhood. It is so beautiful. It would be like living in a national park." Unlike so many developers who take a parcel of land and make a subdivision, whoever developed our neighborhood did not bring in the bulldozers and the great giant earth movers to knock down all the trees before building the houses. So the houses were constructed with the mature oaks and the pine trees saved. Well, we called the real estate agent and we met her out there at the house. And now I'm not saying that Jean and I are impulse buyers, but we are impulse buyers, okay? We toured the house inside and out, and one of my favorite parts was the second floor master bedroom that had a sliding glass door with a deck that took you out into the treetops. I could just envision Jean and I sipping our coffee out there in the morning sunlight while the birds sang, and maybe we would read poetry to one another. It never happened. Well, we made an offer and we signed the papers right then and there. It was September, and the lush green leaves were still tightly bound to the branches of all of the trees. Well, as you know, it takes a while to complete a house purchase, so it was late October before we moved in. By then, the trees were still there, and the leaves now were oh so vibrant with color, reds and oranges and yellows and ambers, and every once in a while, 3 or 4 of the leaves would amber their way down to the ground. It was our own little corner of paradise. Well, a week passed, and now it's November. We woke one morning to find ourselves in the middle of a leaf blizzard. Leaves and more leaves falling everywhere. The yard about this deep now in leaves. And then the next day, this deep in leaves. And the next day, this deep in leaves. And I said, "Jean, I need heavy equipment. I need a yard machine for this, a riding lawn tractor with those giant leaf collectors on the back." And so we pulled out the Sears credit card, and one was delivered. And I got on it, and I took 2 swipes across the front yard, and the leaf collectors were already full and had to be dumped out. And I began then to have ugly thoughts about the leaves and the trees And for 24 years, at that same time of year, I have to be careful, or I'll find myself using unpreacherly-like language about all those blankety-blank trees and their leaves. Well, my affection for trees took another hit 2 years ago, December. Many of you remember this. When one of our 75-foot, 75-year-old oak trees decided to come up by the roots and take a nap in our bedroom. One of her largest and heaviest branches coming through the roof and the wall, landing on my side of the bed. Had it been 3.5 hours later, I would have been in that bed, likely a dead creature man. Yes, I have a mixed romance with trees. Both scripture writers from Psalms and Jeremiah make a case for seeking a life likened after a tree. The best life, both Jeremiah and the psalmist say, the best life is like a tree planted by water. What is it about a tree that we can model that would lead us to such a satisfying life, a healthy life, a meaningful life? Some might say that the good life, the godly life, is like a tree because, you see, a tree never moves. It isn't like one day the big oak tree in the front yard decides to cross the street. A tree stays where it's planted. Now, some may say that a life well-grounded is a life in which the mind and the heart never changes. I made my mind up back in 1966, and I haven't changed it since. In fact, some places you might worship this morning, under the Christian banner, you would hear a preacher who presents a set of biblically connected doctrines and statements of belief, or biblical interpretations about everyday life, and you would be told to accept those and believe those and never question or change one word or comma in them. In some places, Christianity is all about nailing things down. Finding a place in life, finding an opinion to hold, finding a belief to secure, and not moving 1 inch backward or forward, up or down, this way or that. Staying put is what keeps the roots connected. That's the theology in some places. In the first church I served while a seminary student, 23 years old, the Otter Creek Baptist Church in Nebraska, Indiana. I think I've told you about Nebraska. 12 houses, 2 churches, 1 general store in which the post office also was held. It was just like Petticoat Junction and Green Acres. You remember Sam Drucker ran the general store, but then he put on a visor and become the postmaster? I swear, the lady that ran the general store had a visor, and she put it on when she gave you your mail. It was just a few months after I started there at that little church that I performed a funeral service for a gentleman who died at age 91 in the farmhouse in which he had been born and where he had grown up, the house in which he had gotten married and raised his children, and where he had lived every day of his 91 years, except for 2 years he served in the military during World War I. Now, in our transient society, we don't find those kind of roots too often anymore, do we? I lived all my growing up days in the same hometown in Indiana. It is still the town where my mother, who was born there, lives, and my grandparents before her were born there and lived there. And my mom, at age now almost 83, still goes to the same church where she was taken from birth, where she's been singing as an alto in the choir for 69 years, the church in which she was baptized, in which she was married, in which her children were baptized, and her son ordained into ministry. But I've moved since those days, from Indiana to South Carolina to Kentucky to South Carolina. Moved denominations from Baptist to United Methodist. Jean's moved. She's moved, born in Arkansas, moved to Oklahoma, to Colorado, to Georgia, to South Carolina, to Virginia, back to South Carolina, to Kentucky, back to South Carolina. And I suspect that there may be some of you out there who can even beat that record for moving from state to state, even maybe country to country. We are in an ever more transient world, right? And we're in a world of rapid change. Change in how we do things. Most of us haven't learned the new technologies before the old technologies have gone out of place. Most of us have not learned the new technologies before they become old technologies and something else takes their place. Yesterday we were having a meeting of our leadership team here, and Ann Spake, over there in the sound room, was trying to educate us about how to use Google Docs. Saves you can all work on the same document. You don't have to email things back together. And this was the look she got from the whole room. Because some of us haven't even figured out email yet, right? If staying put, if remaining stationary is the mark of a meaningful life, fed by an authentic spiritual connection, then most of us are not doing that very well. If rootedness requires never changing your location, never changing your mind or your heart, then we're in trouble. If Christianity is all about resisting new cultural understandings or arrangements or perspectives, then perhaps the most Christian group of all is the Amish. The Amish who have tried their best to stay put back in the 1800s, haven't they? Resisting automobiles and electricity, as if the horse and buggy and unair-conditioned houses are what keeps you in God's good graces. While there's something to be said for that kind of stability, which growing up and staying in one place all of your life brings, I don't think it's the stationary quality of a tree that the writer of Jeremiah or Psalm 1 is promoting. For sometimes staying put is the worst choice we can make. I meet people every day who are stuck. They're stuck in place. They struggle to see a place beyond the place in life where they are right now. And I pray every day for the right words or for the key to motivating some of you to see and believe that a different life is possible. Amen. Out there. You can move out and move on. You can. There's a reason that in the recovery world, one of the common words of wisdom given says, to be in recovery, you must change. Amen. You must change playmates, right? Amen. And what? Playgrounds. You must move on. What is it we can learn from a tree planted by water? I wonder if it's not the water which is the key. You see, the tree planted in the desert doesn't have much of a chance, does it? The tree whose roots have no place from which to draw the necessary nutrients for life is greatly in danger. The guy who came out to clean up our 75-foot oak tree that invaded my bed said that what had happened to the tree is that after going through nearly 5 years of South Carolina drought, the roots had grown brittle. They didn't have the necessary access to water that they needed to stay healthy and strong. The roots grew brittle, and when the rain did finally come in abundant measure and the ground around the tree became soft, the weight of the tree could not be held upright by the brittle and broken roots. The tree needed water. Our scripture this morning says the place of the healthiest tree is by the water of the riverbank. Christian writer and thinker Diana Butler Bass says, that while walking along the Potomac River, she was taught many things. She says, I learned that the place where the water touches land is called the riparian zone. Remember that. When someone says, what did the preacher talk about today? You say the riparian zone. You'll sound very intelligent. The riparian zone, she says it's one of the most significant ecosystems of the planet. It comes from the Latin word ripa, meaning river bank. The riparian zone acts as a natural filter, cleaning water as it moves into the larger watershed, and protects surrounding soil from erosion by slowing the course of the river. In the process, the riparian zone actually creates new soil and provides vibrant wildlife habitats. That river's edge may be a thin sliver of land, it may be a large marsh, or a cottonwood forest even, but no matter the particular form or location of the riparian zone, the place where water and land touch is necessary for life on earth. What happens on the banks of the creeks and the streams and the rivers is vital to the health of the entire watershed, and the watersheds, in turn, are vital to the health of the whole planet. Both the river itself and the marshy world at the river's edge are what one NASA scientist calls the essential ingredients of life. The tree planted, yes, planted, but planted by the water's edge, is what the writers from Jeremiah and Psalm 1 seem to be emphasizing. As we live in connection to our life source, we find a life worth living, irregardless of our circumstances, in spite of our struggle. Jeremiah, the prophet, certainly knew about struggle, and the people to whom he was speaking knew about struggle. For they were living in very dark times, a time when their life together as a people was in crisis. And many wondered, would their bond together hold? For they had drifted. They had drifted from the one who had made them a people in the first place. They had disconnected themselves from their life source, and it had all become about me. Me. What's best for me? Sound familiar? The question follows then, where and how to get reconnected to our life source? Well, the psalmist seems to say, and Jeremiah, go to the riverbank, to the riparian zone. Gene and I are big fans of Josh Groban and his music. You know Josh Groban? You know, Josh seems to really draw the over 50 crowd. Tuesday night, for an early Valentine's Day, we went over to Greenville for dinner and to the Hollywood 20 Cinema to see a one-night-only showing of Josh Groban's latest sold-out concert from New York's Madison Square Garden. I love all of his songs, but one song in particular caught my attention, and it's entitled River. I was already working on this sermon, and I thought, he must have written that song just because he knew I was going to preach about the river. But listen to some of the words. Some days I can't say why I'm feeling lonely. Some days I'm too proud to ask for help. And I stumble through the noise, trying to find some peace. A stranger in the crowd. I lose myself. So I walk down to the river, where the troubles, they can't find me. Let the waters there remind me. The sun will be there when we wait. I walk down to the river, though I might not understand it. It's not always as we planned it, but we grow stronger when we break. So I walk down to the river, did you ever notice